Welcome back to Authenticity Unleashed. I'm your host, Pam Rader. And today I want to dive into a topic that resonates deeply with me right now. And I think it will resonate with many of you. Today's topic is about our attachment to the stories that we tell about ourselves. We all have stories. We've got stories about how we've been wronged or overlooked or betrayed or abandoned, how people should be a certain way or shouldn't be, and even stories about our traits that we think define us. And all of these things are what shape what we consider to be our identity. And while these narratives can give us a sense of who we are, they can also really limit our experiences. And they keep us stuck in cycles that don't serve us any longer. Now, I was just at a mastermind for 4 days in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, with a group of beautiful coaches and healers, and a lot of people that have done a lot of personal development work. And we were there to grow our businesses. But if you're in this game for long, you recognize that business strategies will only get you so far. You will only ever grow your business as much as you grow. And so a lot of the work that we were doing was personal work, challenging old beliefs, challenging stories. And I happened to see a pattern of story in my life that I had not seen before, and was very excited to see a lot of people also see what they thought was real as just a story that they've been clinging to, and then be able to open up a brand new action plan, if you will, towards a future they couldn't even see before. We've all got these stories. They're like scripts that run in the background of our lives. It might be like the black sheep of the family, or you've always been a hard worker or overachiever, or bad things always happen to you, or you're just unlucky. And these narratives generally stem from real experiences, but over time, they take on a whole life of their own. And we start to see the world through the lens of these stories, and they become a part of our identity. And we have to remember that our brain is a prover. The reticular activating system is looking for proof of whatever story we tell. So the world shows us more of the story that we tell, and that proves it to us. But here's the thing. Our stories aren't necessarily facts. They're how we interpreted something at the time that it happened. And we might not have had all the facts. We might not have realized the lens we were looking at it through then. But then we remember it and we tell the story over and over and over again. And even though we're a completely new version of ourselves and we've seen so many different things, that belief stays ingrained. And we will keep living out that particular story. The stories aren't the truth of who we are. They're interpretations shaped by our perspectives and our emotions. And while they can feel very real, they're not set in stone. So I have shared on this podcast in the past that I've rewritten my story. I came from an abusive first marriage that was fraught with alcoholism and mental health problems with my first husband, threats and manipulation and physical violence. And I did really well, I think, at reshaping that story, claiming it, and letting it empower me into new levels of sharing, helping others. I told the story that I was grateful, that I am grateful for all that happened to me because it woke me up. It set me down a path of self-discovery. I might be just an insufferable jerk if I didn't have that happen to me, And I really do believe that story, and life has showed up for me in that way. But there was a story that was underneath the story that I hadn't really addressed, but it was still playing just as strongly in the background of my mind. You see, when I left Steve and was a single mom, there were a lot of people in my life who probably didn't know, in hindsight, they probably didn't know how to be in my space while I had been through so much. They didn't know what to say, what to do. And so they swept it under the rug. Oh, well, it's a good thing you're okay, or that's really too bad because Steve was a nice guy. there were plenty of comments like that. Even some comments about, well, what did you do to make him attack you? And that's a part of my story that I never tell. And in the background, I felt betrayed by these people. Some of them were friends, some of them were family, but I repressed that. And that story that I was betrayed was playing out in the background. And I started to see at this retreat I was at recently that I have set myself up to experience emotional betrayal over and over and over again in my life. It seems like something that keeps happening to me. And what I didn't do at the time that I left my first husband was tell the whole story. I went right to bypassing or spiritually bypassing some of it and saying, aren't I grateful that it happened to me? But I didn't let myself feel the rage and the anger of the injustice of it and the feeling of being betrayed, feeling so angry at being betrayed by people that I thought were close friends of mine. And I stuffed that anger down. And to protect myself, I was running the narrative, the story that, yeah, like I'm just people betray you. People betray you, Pam. That's how it is. People are people, and that's how it is. And it kept showing up for me that way. But when I recognized this pattern, I thought, oh my gosh, I can't just tell one side of the story. I need to allow my psyche to see both sides of the story, that it was horrible and terrible and awful and beautiful. That there were people who didn't meet my expectations and I felt betrayed. I made it mean that I was betrayed. And I never let myself feel the rage that perspective or lens showed me. And so at this retreat, I allowed myself to feel angry for the girl of 22 years old who had those terrible things happen to her. And suddenly, my story rearranged itself. I still feel empowered. I still feel grateful. I still feel as though I am a coach and a leader and someone who serves humanity because of all those things that happen. But I also saw that I've been playing a game in the background, running a narrative that everyone betrays me. And I could find evidence of it. And as I released this anger and acknowledged it, I was able to see that that's actually not the case at all. What I was looking for was someone to protect me. And when I trusted someone or had an expectation that they would protect me in some way and they didn't, then I felt profoundly betrayed and I relived the story of betrayal. As soon as I saw it clearly, it set me free. And this is what I want for each of you. To actually be able to look at your stories and challenge the truth of them. What's the whole truth? What's the good, the bad, and the ugly? Who do you want to be because of that? Are there things about your story you could let go? Are there parts of the story you haven't told? And then I'm going to give you some practical tools for how to rewrite your stories, how to reshape them, how to let go of stories that don't serve you. So, while I was in Mexico, walking along the beach, I noticed how the waves would just wash away footprints in the sand over and over again. And each time I made a footprint in the sand, the wave would come and wash it away. Each wave created like a brand new canvas full of possibility. And it really struck me that this is just like our stories. We can wash away the old story and tell a new one, a better one that's more aligned with who we are now. It struck me that we all have the ability to wipe the slate clean. Each moment is new, each breath is new, and in each and every breath and each and every moment, we can let go of the past and create something brand new. Imagine if the ocean refused to wash away the footprints, holding on to them instead. it would stagnate. It would be a mess. The water wouldn't be able to flow freely. And in the same way, when we cling to our stories, we actually block the flow of new possibilities in our lives. And you might say, I don't really have any stories. Well, you have stories about yourself and you have stories about other people. Stories that your mom is just a certain way. And your brain will try to prove that to you. You've got stories about your sister or your brother or your boss. You've got stories about how other people have treated you. Trust me when I say you got a boatload of stories, and a lot of them aren't serving you. In yoga teachings, this idea aligns with the concept of samskaras, or mental impressions or patterns that shape our behavior. So samskaras are like grooves in the sand created by repetitive thoughts or actions. And the more we dwell on a story, the deeper the groove becomes. We can't see beyond it. And then our actions and our behaviors are born from those stories. But yoga also teaches us that through awareness and practice, we can smooth out these grooves. Meditation and mindfulness help us to recognize our samskaras or impressions or old stories and to create space for new patterns, new stories to arise. When we release our attachment to our stories, we liberate ourselves from the limitations that they impose. So let's explore what happens when we shift our narrative. Imagine a person who's always identified as, quick-tempered. And the story might have served them at some point, but now it's holding them back. Every social interaction becomes a confirmation that they're impatient and quick-tempered. But what if they decided to rewrite that story? And instead of saying, oh, I've always been hot-headed, they say, I'm learning to become more patient and compassionate. The subtle shift in language and perspective can change our energy and open up to new possibilities. We have to be really careful about how we speak about ourselves, because each time we speak something like I'm impatient, I'm this way, I claim that thing out of the past and I bring it into my present and I make it my future. Or I could shift my language and create a brand new story and live into that story. So try this on. When you catch yourself in an old story like, oh, they're always this way, or I have been this way, try on something like, I'm in the process of learning a new way. If you see someone doing something and you say they've always done it, I'd love for you to challenge that. Well, that person's always shy, or that person's always rude. Well, is anyone always anything? No. Always is impossible. People aren't always rude or always impatient. They have moments of patience and moments of politeness. And when we say always, we negate that possibility for our brain to even see or entertain. We don't see the whole picture. So catch yourself in your speaking, getting rid of always and never as often as possible, and opening up narratives like, I'm in the process of learning something new. The lotus flower, it grows in muddy water, but it rises above the surface to bloom in pristine beauty. The mud doesn't define the lotus, it nourishes it. Similarly, our past stories, they don't have to define us. In fact, they don't if you say they don't. They can be the fertile ground from which we grow and transform. And we can continue to tell those stories in a new way as we grow. And I think that's really the healthy way. There's a famous quote by Marcel Proust. The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. Let me read that again. The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. And so revisiting our past with fresh eyes, with curiosity, and maybe adding in the nuances that we see now differently with more empathy, more compassion, more willingness to see the whole truth is actually the pathway to rewriting our stories. When we see our stories for what they are, interpretations rather than facts, then we're free to rewrite them. And when we change how we see ourselves, our world shifts in response. As within, so without. Think of a kaleidoscope. With just a little small twist of the kaleidoscope, the entire pattern changes. The pieces inside don't disappear, they're just rearranged. In the same way, when we shift our perspective, the elements of our life take on new meaning and possibility. So what can we do? What can we do practically to start shifting some of our stories and let go of the ones that don't serve you? Number one, pause and reflect. The next time you catch yourself repeating a familiar story, I'm not good enough, or people always let me down, ask yourself, is this story constructive or destructive? Is it serving me to move into the highest version of myself, or is it keeping me small? And just in that reflection, you may create a willingness to really examine the story and discover some in your narrative. Number two, breathe into the present. Use your breath to anchor you in the here and now. The breath lives in the eternal now. It's like each inhale and exhale is new. And so as you exhale, just imagine releasing the weight of your story. And with each inhale, invite in new possibilities. So you exhale old and then ask, who am I without this story? So we've got pause and reflect, and then breathe. Watch your breath. Your breath is like the waves, your greatest teacher, letting go, starting new. The third tip is to rewrite the narrative. Take a limiting belief and reframe it. For example, if your story was, I've always been overlooked, try saying, I'm learning to advocate for myself. If your story has been that you can't trust people, maybe you change the narrative and say, I'm learning to put myself in places and spaces that I can trust. Now, the fourth tip is to visualize the waves. Much like the breath, the ocean is a great teacher. Close your eyes and picture the ocean washing away the footprints of your old story. And just feel the freedom of a blank slate. We all have a blank slate in every moment. And finally, practice gratitude. When we focus on what's present and possible right now and what we're grateful for, we can actually connect the beautiful things around us to the things that have happened in our past and shift the story. Gratitude vibrates at a much higher frequency than victimhood. And when we practice gratitude, our stories naturally shift. So if you've got a story like, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not talented enough, someone's doing something to me, and you're suffering because of it, perhaps this podcast today is a little nudge for you to examine some of those stories, look at the whole truth, ask yourself, does this serve me to keep telling the same story? And if not, rewrite the story. We are dynamic, ever-evolving beings with the power to create ourselves anew in each moment. So, as we close today's episode, I invite you to reflect. What stories are you ready to release? What new possibility will you create in its place? And to remind yourself that the waves are always there, ready to wash away the footprints and offer you a fresh start. So thank you for joining me on this journey of self-discovery today. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, keep embracing your authenticity and the infinite possibilities of each and every moment.